On tap this week is the AFDB's African Debt Management Initiative Network, which will be discussed on Friday in Abuja at a meeting to be attended by African finance ministers, central bankers, and debt managers. Joining me now for an exclusive interview tonight is Professor Kelvin Urama. Professor Urama is AFDB Group's chief economist and a vice president of the DFI based in Côte d'Ivoire. We thank you so much, Professor, for making it tonight on the show on Arise News.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. Now, what makes this structured training program in public finance management critical for Africa top civil servants?
Thank you so much. As you know, managing public finances is at the bane of managing revenue to be able to increase productivity and the gross domestic product of countries. So that is why the African Development Bank Group has chosen to establish a public financial management academy that will help working with partners, the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD, UNCTAD, and other institutions that work in this sector across the continent, including the AERC, CABRI, ATAF, and others, coming together and pulling together experienced ministers of finance, central bank governors, debt managers, to put together this structured training program to help countries to understand how better to address most of the areas where we have leakages in our public financial management, be it in the area of domestic revenue mobilization or prudential budget planning and public expenditure management, macro fiscal policy modeling and management, debt and debt sustainability management, but also improving accountability systems across the whole of the public financial management cycle and ecosystems. It is very important that we do this because quite often you hear that why financial flows is not coming to Africa is because of concerns around corruption and poor governance of public finances. And when you look at what Africa is losing due to illicit financial flows, which is the topic of the final training we're having with the cohort of trainees today, you find that Africa is losing almost $90 billion annually because of illicit financial flows. If you include illicit resource flows from our mines and our oil wells and other things, that figure is even much more. And if you add trade misinvoicing and also wrongfully crafted fiscal policies that gives tax incentives to multinational companies that invest in Africa, there's huge amounts of resources that Africa could retain on the continent in order to go into public financial issues like addressing the cases of health, education, infrastructure, and all the things that governments struggle to find a fiscal space to be able to address. Just to put it in perspective, what Africa is losing in illicit financial flows is far much more than the total of ODA that we receive in Africa and most of the other financial inflows into the continent. So if you look at the net, Africa is losing much more than it's getting from all these other sources. So plugging those holes and improving the capacity to improve domestic revenue mobilization and budgeting, but also sustainable borrowing so that we don't have all these reeling challenges of debt sustainability problems across many countries in Africa. The gross domestic product of the continent will grow, will increase quite much, even if Africa didn't produce more. But we know that when you do that, you will also have more resources to put into productive investments on the continent. Yes, and that is why the bank, the African Development Bank Group, has focused on this.
Yeah, interesting again when you look at the World Bank report about how much developing countries are coughing out in terms of debt management. You need to put an eye on public finance. And I'm just going to ask, who are in this training program? How extensive it is? Who are the partners? And what are your expectations in terms of how the knowledge and skills that are gotten here will be used by the participants?
Yes, the partners of the training partners for this PFMA Institute are very diverse. We have our development partners, the World Bank, the IMF, I have also said the OECD, UNCTAD, and several other international agencies, but also the African institutes like MEFMI, CABRI, ATAF, AERC, and many other think tanks on the continent are working on these areas. But the most interesting part of it is that we also have former finance ministers and central bank governors who have actually rolled their sleeves and done this business in their countries, and they know where the leakages are, they know where the challenges are. So the African Development Bank Group have established a policy lab unit that brings together all these global and local and national experts together to help craft solutions that are embedded in Africa's realities. And that is where the impact of this training program lie, because we are working, the first cohort, we had 45 African countries nominate their public officials. We had 145 nominees from these 45 African countries who are actual managers of their public finances or debt or monetary policy in the central bank, to go through this training program, which is an 18-month program that covers all the cycle of public financial management and the public finance management ecosystems. So there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning happening among African countries, but there are also peer-to-peer learning among experts, African experts and global experts coming together to look at the theory and the practice and ensure that whatever programs and training we are giving to countries are embedded in the particular realities of those countries. Because politics matter, culture matters, religion matters, and people matter. And if you have a policy on public financial management that works in the United States, it's not necessarily true that it will work in every other country. And that is embedding those training programs in the countries is a key aspect of what we have managed to achieve here. So now we have 52 out of that 145 nominees who have gone through the 18-month training and now qualify to become graduates, and they will receive certificates at Training of Trainers tomorrow to go back to their countries and start practicing what they have learned and continue in that network of working together. And that is why part of the program is the establishment of that debt management network, Africa Debt Management Network, that we will be launching also tomorrow.
That was my next point about this new African Debt Management Initiative Network that the AFDB is setting up, and the new benchmark macroeconomic models report being launched in Abuja on Friday this week. It's a very busy week for you and your team at the AFDB in Abuja. Bring me up to speed on what this Africa Debt Network Initiative is all about.
The DEMFA, the Debt Management Network for Africa, brings heads of debt management officials from across the continent, from finance ministries, colleagues from budget and planning offices, economic planning, central banks, to come together to now start practicing that knowledge sharing and making sure that we are co-developing African solutions for Africa's challenges in the debt management space. As you know, many African countries have been facing a lot of debt challenges because of the debt architecture, but also because of policies and economic governance principles in countries that need to change. So learning from what some countries in Africa have done well that others should copy, and what others are not doing well that others should not try, would be a very good thing for us to do to ensure that there is continuity in the learning and practice after the graduation of this first cohort of the PFMA. And then we're also going to be having 22 new nominees from all the 54 countries out of the continent. So we'll be having over 1,000 more people in the second cohort that starts in January next year. Now, the macroeconomic benchmark models for macroeconomic policy management that were launched in Addis Ababa in November and we're going to be showcasing here was also another aspect of our work to try and help countries to get the necessary tools and skills, both soft and hard skills, to do macroeconomic and macro fiscal policy modeling so that they're able to understand the dynamics of their economies and responses to different policy stimuli and shocks. And that report that we are going to be showcasing tomorrow, next tomorrow, will show what skills that we have on the continent, where the gaps are, and where banks like development banks like the African Development Bank, World Bank, and other partners need to put resources in technical assistance to beef up that capacity so that we can plan for our economies based on our own realities and therefore have better development outcomes from the fiscal space that we have.
Yeah, we're following very closely your week here in Nigeria. Thank you so much speaking to us live from Abuja, this exclusive. Thank you to manage. We appreciate this with you here on our Rice Exchange. Thank you so much. And we wish you all the best and the rest of the AFDB team. Professor Kelvin Urama, Chief Economist and the Vice President at the AFDB Group.